Hi. Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Himashri, and I'm a senior executive at the India Alliance, and I'll be your host for today's workshop. So right now it's 4 and we are starting the workshop on time. So today we are going to talk to you about this is an outreach webinar on funding opportunities as part of the IRMI, or which is short for the India Research Management Initiative of DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance. So let me first start with a quick introduction to the organization India Alliance. So we are a charitable trust registered in India that funds research in health and biomedical sciences. So we do fund research in India, but apart from that, we also invest in transformative ideas, support research ecosystems to advance discovery and innovation to improve health and well-being. We are being funded by the Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, and the Wellcome Trust, UK. Apart from funding research, we also fund various other programs that promote national and international collaborations, professional skill building workshops, programs on strengthening research ecosystem, and also promote science education awareness and public engagement with science in India. So the IRMI initiative, or the India Research Management Initiative, is being developed with a mission to strengthen the research ecosystems in India by building capacity for research management and creating a community of practice. So today we are joined here by a team of experts and esteemed panelists. Will speak to you about the recently announced IRMI funding programs, IRMI travel grant, IRMI grant, and IRMI fellowships. And we will hear more about this. But before we move ahead, I would like to walk you all through a few housekeeping tips that will help you all to navigate the console and better participate in this webinar. So please do note that your video and microphone will remain switched off during the webinar so that you can listen to the speaker as well. You can give any questions, any queries you have in your mind for the speakers during the webinar in the chat box. In the question box, so you'll be able to see a questions box in the right side, as you can see in the screen right now, and you can type it out there. Also, please note this webinar is being recorded and we will share part of it on the India Alliance social media handles, mostly on the YouTube channel. So please keep your eye on that. We also request you to join back using the same registration link in case there is any technical glitch which leads to the ending of the webinar or any issue in the webinar. We also look forward to your participation and during the question and answer session. Also, please note you can raise your hand with the virtual hand to be unmuted to ask a question during the session towards the end, and we'll unmute you so that you can directly talk to the speakers. So next on, we have the agenda for today's workshop. You will be introduced to the IRMI initiative, and then we will talk about the various funding opportunities that are available and how you can apply for them. You will hear from grantees and fellows who have already gone through the entire process, who will guide you through it. And then we'll also hear from the other side of the table from a reviewer who will talk to you how IRMI grants are looked into and what the research ecosystem is going to be like. So please join us for our first session, which will be taken by Dr. Savita Iyer. Dr. Savita Iyer is leading the development of the India Research Management Initiative as part of DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance. She has over 14 years of experience as grants advisor and research manager. She has received her PhD degree from the University of Cambridge in UK in developmental biology, and further pursued her postdoctoral training in neurobiology from the same university. She has a vast experience, and she will is the right person to introduce you to the initiative. So I hand over the screen now to Savita for her presentation.
Thank you so much, Himashri, for that wonderful introduction, both to today's webinar and to the initiative. So it's a pleasure to be here. A very warm welcome to all of you who are attending, who've joined the webinar this afternoon here in India, of course. And it's a pleasure to be here at the fourth call for competitions for the IRMI initiative. So what I thought I'd do is to just briefly walk us all through the IRMI initiative for those of you who are new to this initiative. What is it about? And I note that in our audience today, we have a mix of research managers. We also have researchers. There are some questions already coming in where researchers would like to know how to get funding for their research. So I think it's really important that we set the context and talk about research management today. If I could have the next slide, please. So as I said, I mean, garnering research funding is a very important part of any researcher's life. This is a prerequisite for carrying out programs of research. And very simply put, the funding life cycle can be thought of as being across two halves. There's the pre-award part of it and the post-award part of it. The pre-award side of the funding life cycle includes actually coming up with the idea, finding the right kind of funding opportunity, writing a proposal, developing the budget, putting all the papers together, and submitting a proposal to a funding agency. And the funding agency might take a decision to either award or not, and if it's awarded, then activating the grant. The post-award half of the funding cycle kicks in, obviously, once the grant is awarded, and that is really where the program gets initiated. Along with that, all of the expenditures towards hiring personnel, purchasing equipment, all the kinds of expenses that are needed for the grant and for keeping the project on track. There might be annual or other periodic cycles of reporting back to the funding agency, both the technical side of it and the financial reporting. There might be grant transitions. For example, the investigator might decide to move institutions or pre-close a grant, in which case there are specific actions that need to be taken both by the investigator and by their institution. And finally, the grant comes towards an end, at which point there is another cycle of reporting that includes the technical report and the financial report. And this, in a nutshell, is the funding cycle. This is what an investigator would face, but equally, this is not carried out in isolation by the investigator, but it is in collaboration with an institution. And institutions can help researchers by providing very specific research management services that can take away some of the administrative burden of these steps. The next slide, please. So if we look at what is research administration, we can probably break it up into these large categories. So as I said, well, one aspect of it is partnership building, because there's often a lot of work that is involved in putting a consortium together, bringing different institutions and investigators together. It may be an international partnership, and institutions might have international partnerships teams that support these kinds of activities. Those are all research management activities designed to keep research at the fore and to move those programs forward. Pre-award services, what I just spoke about as the pre-award half of the funding life cycle, there are very discrete institutional services where a team of support staff can work with the investigators to help their proposals that are being submitted to the funding agencies. Post-award services, tracking all of the reporting, the expenditure, making sure everything is on track, working along with the investigators. Statutory compliances are another very important aspect, particularly in the life sciences. So if a project involves, for example, stem cell research or animal research, there are various national guidelines and requirements which have to be met, and an institution is obliged to ensure that those regulations are complied with. And there is usually an ethics secretariat that supports all of these activities. So that is another part of the research management support at institutions. And finally, we come to the end of the cycle where at the end of the project, there are the outputs of research. And so there is a lot of work at the institution for collating these outputs of research, both from individual projects and across the entire institution. If we could just move forward a bit. Thank you. So this is a word cloud which we've had where several of our colleagues from research management in India have just jotted down some thoughts on what they think research management is. And if you see, then a lot of that actually aligns with the 5 areas that I've listed on the left of the slide. So this in a nutshell is research management and administration. And the IRMI initiative has evolved to help institutions in India build these kinds of services. Now, it's important to remember that we've always had very generous support, funding support from the government of India and other funding agencies for research across a wide variety of disciplines. But research management support at institutions is still relatively new, and this is a gap that the IRMI initiative hopes to address. Next slide, please. So very quickly about the genesis of the IRMI initiative, for those who don't know. IRMI began as a 12-month pilot, and during that pilot, I interacted with about 40 institutions across India of different kinds that were funded by MHRD, by DBT, by the Department of Atomic Energy. And all of these conversations are designed to understand the status of research management in India, and that was in 2018. So the findings or the insights from this IRMI pilot were published in an open letter, and this is available off the India Alliance website. It's published in Welcome Open Research. So if you haven't had a chance to read this publication, I'd invite you to do that. But the IRMI pilot of 12 months laid the ground for what was the next phase of the IRMI initiative. Could you go ahead, please, Abdul? Thank you. So in 2019, the current phase of IRMI was launched with 4 strategic priorities. The first is actually helping institutions that would like to build research management services. The second is supporting research managers with building their careers. The third was to build national and international partnerships for resource and knowledge exchange. And the fourth and very important component of the IRMI initiative is actually building a community of practice. Back in 2018, when all of this began, we were a handful of research managers across India, concentrated majorly in cities such as Bangalore, Delhi, and Pune. And so a key goal of the IRMI initiative has been to bring more research managers into the fold and to bring them together as a network. Abdul, please, could you go ahead? Thank you. So as of now, in the current phase of IRMI, this is being implemented through a combination of flagship funding programs and community activities. The funding initiatives are really important because the India Alliance recognizes that resources are required for building research management in India. And as I said, the second half of it, the community programs, that's really important for keeping us connected together as a community. And so a particular thanks to all the research managers who have joined our webinar today. It's really nice to see everyone back together through this platform. Could I have the next slide, please? So there are 3 funding opportunities through the IRMI initiative, and my colleagues Relina and Surinder are going to talk through these opportunities in detail. So I will not spend time talking about these. My colleagues will speak instead. Next slide, please. So I'd just like to say that, as a part of the IRMI initiative, we're focused on raising awareness about research management. So through 2020, 21, and 22, we've organized several webinars and workshops. And the recordings for these webinars are actually available on the India Alliance YouTube channel, if anyone would like to take a look at them. And these webinars actually have covered several different kinds of topics in the area of research management. We have brought together colleagues from India, from overseas, colleagues working at institutions, those staff from funding agencies. And so this is a very nice playlist of content, which is very, very useful for India. So do take a look at the playlist if you haven't had a chance to do so and would like to know a little bit more about research management. Next slide, please. And as part of the IRMI initiative, the other major activity we've embarked on for bringing the community together is actually organizing an annual conference. So we organized the first annual conference last year, and I'm very happy to say that we have an excellent lineup for the conference that happens this year. It's still a virtual conference, and if you haven't registered, you can take a look at the program that's up on the website, and you can put in your registration. Next slide, please. You can register to be part of the IRMI network, and this network is growing, and it's wonderful to see that. So on that note, I'll stop and I'll pass on to the next speaker. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Savita, for taking us briefly through agenda, the IRMI network and introducing us to the research ecosystem initiatives here. So next on we have both Dr. Relina Vasu and Dr. Surinder Mohan, both of who are grants advisors at India Alliance and are involved in the IRMI initiative. So they will talk to you about the IRMI grants and IRMI fellowships and briefly explain to you the difference and between the two. So over to you, Relina and Surinder.
Thank you, Himashri. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll just share my screen. Give me a minute. So is my presentation visible? Thanks, everyone. So I'll just stop my video. Okay. So good afternoon. Hope everyone is doing well. And thanks, Savita, for taking us through the whole IRMI initiative, how the initiative came into being and what the ideology of the initiative is. So today I'll be taking you through the IRMI Research Management Fellowship, which is one of the programs that's a part of the IRMI initiative, and my colleague will take you through the Research Management Grant. And to begin with, just a second. Yeah, so what is the purpose of the Research Management Fellowship? So our IRMI RM Fellowship is a combined mentored fellowship as well as an institutional strengthening program. It is based mainly for research institutions that are seeking to establish their research management office, and it is the activities of the research management office is mainly through a particular individual who has been recruited specifically for this purpose. And through this RM scheme, we basically try to the India Alliance tries to support the creation of research offices at diverse institutions across India, and this setup of the office is spearheaded by the research management fellow who is recruited for this purpose on this fellowship. So moving on from beyond the purpose of the fellowship to the different aspects of the fellowship. So one of the aspects or core aspect of this fellowship are the provisions. So under the fellowship, we provide salary support of the RM fellow as well as the miscellaneous costs. So now going a bit into the depth of the salary support and miscellaneous costs, support of up to 6 lakhs funding per annum towards the salary of the research management fellow is provided, but institutions have the option to either request the maximum permissible amount of 18 lakhs, which is for the 3 year of the fellowship, or towards the salary support, or they can actually decide to choose a lesser amount as salary contribution for the nominee, and the rest of the amounts can be moved towards the miscellaneous costs, which are basically clearly defined expenses towards the establishment and development of the research management office. So the combined expenses that go towards the salary support and the miscellaneous expenses are capped to a maximum of INR 18 lakhs. And there's another 1 lakh that is provided towards the training budget of the RM fellow. So together, the provisions of the RM fellowship, the funding provision of the RM fellowship is a total of INR 19 lakhs. And apart from the funding allowance, we also provide mentorship over a 6 months period. And this is mainly to train the RM fellow in different research office processes. And also would like to point out that there are no overheads for the institutions as part of the provisions of the RM fellowship. So next is, what are the roles on an application for an RN fellowship? So the first role is that of a sponsor. A sponsor is an individual who would generally undertake the institutional responsibility for the fellowship and who can agree to the IA award conditions. That's the India Alliance award conditions. And as part of an application, we would mandatorily require a letter of support that addresses the long-term sustainability of the proposal as well as the fellow as part of this RM fellowship. Now, the next role on the application that we have is of a fellowship supervisor. A fellowship supervisor is a senior researcher or a member of staff at the host institution and who would be taking responsibility for the RM fellow. So the training as well as the day-to-day update and the direct line management of the RM fellow is under the rim of the fellowship supervisor. And as part of the application, we require a letter for support from the fellowship supervisor, which details the mentoring plan as well as highlights the key steps that the fellowship supervisor intends to take to guide the candidate through the 3 years of the fellowship. Now, the next role is on this application is the RM fellow or the nominee is the individual who would be taking forward the task of setting up the research management office. And as a requirement or under this fellowship, there is a minimum time commitment of 50% of the total working time towards the different aims and objectives, or towards fulfilling the different aims and objectives that have been mentioned on the fellowship. And apart from the sponsor, the fellowship supervisor, and the nominee, we can also, applicants can also add mentors and collaborators who would be assisting the development of the proposal as well as the guiding of the whole fellow as well as the project. So now moving on to the next provision or the aspect of the fellowship is the institution contribution. So as part of the IRMI fellowship, the institution, once they are awarded, the institution needs to provide the office expenses. They would be providing the resources towards the research office developments, and they are required to work with the research office to integrate them into different administrative structures that are present at the host institution. And also it is the institutional contribution includes the setting of a steering committee, which helps in monitoring the progress of the proposal as well as the fellow through the 3 years of the fellowship. So then now coming from the different aspects of the RN fellowship, we move into the application format as well as the selection criteria. So the first thing that the application, while scanning the application, it's looked at is the status of the research at the institution as well as the status of research management at the institution. It's these 2 points are also covered in the IRMI institutional registration form, which is a prerequisite for submitting an application, and it's available on our website. It can be downloaded and submitted along with the application if your institution is not already registered with IRMI. And then the vision of the research office is looked at. So what are the expected impacts from the research office? What are the long-term goals? Whether gaps have been identified in the ongoing work, and what solutions have been proposed to address these gaps. And next, we also look at the implementation plan. So what are the steps that have been thought through towards implementing the proposed research office structure as well as plans and the proposed objectives of the research office. And the application also should cover the management plan, like how do they plan to manage, what are the steering committee's role, how are they going to monitor the progress of the applicants over the RN fellowship. And then we look at the nominee's profile as well as the fit of the nominee to the host institution's requirements, the budget details along with the justification, and the proposed time course of the objectives, how they will be performed, as well as the milestones. So the final thing that or not the final maybe, but one of the main core things that committee looks at also while judging an application is the sustainability plan, like what is the plan to sustain the office as well as the RM fellow beyond the period of the fellowship, and the availability of resources towards that are being provided towards the development of the office activities as well as the career development of the fellow. So next, some of the criterias or some of the points that are looked at while evaluating an application are like the effectiveness of the research office in furthering the research and innovation at the host institution. what is the time course of activities leading up to the development of a functional research office, what is the profile of the RM fellow and how fit it is to the institutional requirements, as well as the adequacy and of the management, as well as the sustainability plan. So going through all these things, something that comes out clearly is that while filling an application, it's not just that the nominee or the institution can do it in silo, but generally we advise from the office that they should write the proposal in consultation with each other. So just as so this is a snapshot of all the RN fellowships that have been awarded. So these are from round 1 and 2, and very soon we'll have the round 3 that has been awarded joining this map. And before I end this part, I would also like to note that the application forms for this round are available on our website. So to access the application form, you can either go to India Alliance website and go to the funding tab, and under funding you have the India Research Management Initiative, or you can directly go to our page using this link. And once you go to the India IRMI page, you can open any of the schemes, and under the schemes, under the sub-tab of application process, you would be able to access the application form. So now this was about the IRMI RM fellowship, and I'll hand over to the mic to my colleague, Dr. Surendra Mohan, who will take you through the next program. Thank you.
Thank you, Delina. Hello, everyone. I'm Surendra from India Alliance, and I'll be talking about the India Alliance Research Management Grants. I'll turn off my video to save some bandwidth. Can we go to the next slide? Okay. So the purpose of this grant is to support research institutions or universities that are seeking to develop unique research management solutions. This is for addressing institutional requirements, and they may require funding, training, as well as mentoring. So therefore, institutions looking for support for expansion of existing services via a research office can apply for this scheme. And funds can be used to create a national resource which are openly accessible to the research community, or can be used for supporting learning visits in research management, and also for networking events and collaborative projects. Next slide, please. The provisions under the scheme, 10 lakhs INR can be requested for a 1-year project duration, and funds can be requested for personal support, support staff salary, trainings, and also any other justified costs for improving the existing research office or developing the resource. Research managers hired as part of this grant become a member of IRMI community. And as far the application is concerned, the primary roles in the applications are mandatory, and this includes a sponsor who must have a signatory authority on the grant. The sponsor must provide a letter of support addressing a long-term sustainability plan of the resource and the office. Next is the applicant. Please note that there can be more than one applicant, and in such a case, there will be only one lead applicant who will be the primary grant holder, and the other applicant will be the co-applicant on the grant. The co-applicant participating on the grant must be from a partner institution. The lead applicant will be called a nominee who is nominated by the research institution for this grant application. And other roles are optional and can include collaborators or mentors who can train the research managers to develop a system and fulfill the objectives of the proposed grant. So it is expected that the institution applying for this grant has an established research management structure, and this is supported by some office expenses. So this research management structure is well supported with all resources, and it is also integrated with existing administrative structures at the host institution. So applicants are required to identify members for a steering committee. These can be members from it can be internal as well as external, and this committee is mainly meant to monitor the progress of the grant and also aid in the development of the research office at the host institution. Next slide, please. Coming to the application format, applicants can visit our IRMI webpage and download the application format under the application process tab. In the application, primarily we seek information regarding the status of research at the institution, status of research management at institution, the vision for research office, whether gaps have been identified in the ongoing work, or if any proposed solution have been thought through to address these gaps. These are the main points that needs to be filled out. Applicants are also required to provide an implementation plan and is expected to describe the steps towards implementing the solution to address these gaps. And in addition to that, a detailed management plan, budget details with justification, as well as milestones across different phases during the project tenure should also be included in the application form. One important aspect of the application is the sustainability plan, and applicants are required to provide a detailed plan of sustainability of their research office during and beyond the project tenure. This must also include description on the sustainability of resources and how the research management staff will continue to engage at the institution beyond the grant period. One more point I would like to add here is that institutions which are not registered with the IRMI network previously, they are required to download the IRMI institutional registration form from our website and send the duly filled form to our email irmi@indiaalliance.org. Next slide, please. So next, I would like to describe the selection criteria for the committee, and these are based on 5 different components, and applicants are required to be mindful of these points when applying for this competition. One is effectiveness of activity or the resource in furthering research and innovation at the institution. And another important criteria is how the existing research support will be augmented and how the proposed plan will help in integrating with the Indian research ecosystem. And finally, 2 major points: management plan and sustainability plan. I have already discussed this previously. These must be elaborate and must be described in detail. So all these points must be considered while drafting your application form. Next slide. This is a map of institutions which were awarded the research management grant in 2019 as well as in 2020. As you can see, the network is expanding rapidly, and awardees will get a good opportunity to be a part of this growing community and learn. Next slide. Now, before I hand over to Himashri, some important points to note for applying to our research management scheme. So only one application from a not-for-profit institution supporting biomedical research will be considered for the scheme. Application form can be accessed from our website. It's a Word document. So applicants are required to fill the details and send the application as a PDF format. So the duly filled format should be sent as a single PDF to irmi@indiaalliance.org within the deadline, and any application received beyond the deadline will not be accepted. One important point which I would like to repeat here again: institutional registration form is mandatory and a prerequisite for application submission. So in case you have any questions, please type your questions in the chat box and we'll get back to you. And yeah, I would like to thank you, and I'm handing over to Himashri. Thank you.
Thank you, Surinder and Relina, for taking us through the IRMI grants and fellowships processes, application processes, and I'm sure it will help the prospective applicants to apply in the application process. Just a reminder that our applications are open currently, and the deadline, as mentioned by recently by Surendra, is 18th of October 2022. You will be able to, I have attached the link to the website and the research management link in the chat box. So next, now that you know what research management fellowship is, we have with us a person who is a research management fellow with us. So I invite Dr. Alpana Dave, the research management manager and academic coordinator at the National Institute of Biomedical Genetics. So she also has a PhD in molecular biology and molecular genetics of cataract from Flinders University of South Australia. Her postdoctoral training was done at Ballygunge Science College, University of Calcutta, and LV Prasad Eye Institute, Hyderabad. She has been involved in scientific research also for more than 10 years, and are now involved in the research management of NIBMG. So she will be sharing her own experiences as a fellow with you all, and her own journey through the process. So over to you, Dr. Dave, for your presentation.
Can you see my slides?
Can you put it on full screen?
Yeah. Yes. Can you see them?
Yes.
Okay. I'll just turn off my webcam just to save bandwidth. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mashri, for that introduction. So, Relina has kind of given you an overview of what Research Management Fellowship will provide, like all the bits about it. So I'll just share in the next few minutes, I'll share my experience with this fellowship. So to give you a background, an idea about my background. So I completed my PhD from Flinders University in Australia in 2014. And I had a wonderful time during my PhD. I enjoyed it thoroughly. So I was all pumped to come back to India and continue in academics. So I started applying for all the different postdoctoral research fellowships which are available. Was lucky to get the DBTRA fellowship, with which I joined Calcutta University in 2016. So it was after joining my postdoc, I realized why I enjoyed my research at Flinders, and big credit for that goes to the research support which was available at Flinders University. And because of that, I then started thinking about careers in science management and administration, which brought me to this workshop, which was organized by ISAPONE in 2017. And attending this workshop was more like an eye-opener for me, and also it gave me a lot of comfort to know that there is a group of women who are actually already working in the field of science administration and management and are doing a fantastic job at their respective institutes. That kind of gave me some inspiration that I could actually, some motivation that I could actually continue looking for jobs in this field. So along with this, the research management part, I was also looking for other postdoctoral opportunities. And that is how I came through. I got this job at LV Prasad. I moved to Hyderabad in 2018 for my postdoc. It was around the same time that Dr. Ponari Gotipatti joined LV Prasad as a grants manager. And so that gave me an opportunity to actually talk to her and to know what she does and how she manages it. And I have to thank her for introducing me to IRMI, because when the first round of fellowships were announced, she informed me about them, and it was also this around the same time that I was looking at coming back to Kolkata, where my family is. So I reached out to a few institutes in and around Kolkata, including NIBMG. So our director, Professor Das, our then director of NIBMG, Professor Das, was already looking for someone to manage their grants. So it just happened that I reached out to him, and he asked me to join NIBMG. So I did not apply in the 2019 round, but I applied in the 2020 round and was lucky enough to get the fellowship. So to begin with, we started off with very basic grant management at the research office, and we were also involved in preparing different institutional reports, various presentations, and various other information that needs to be sent to DVT from NIBMG. I was also involved in organizing various seminars and events at the institute. Now we are slowly also getting into facilitating the agreements and MOUs, doing the due diligence before they're signed. Also keeping a track of the compliances and clearances that all the projects have to go through before they start, and assist the faculty members with collaborations both with academia and industry. So just to give you an idea, before I joined, the structure of the institute was what you can see on the left. So where basically the faculty members were doing all the to and fro between admin and finance and with the director's office to get all their for the project management part. Once I joined in, as I said, we just started off with basic grants management. So then the faculty members could actually submit their documents to me, and I used to perform the due diligence before forwarding it to the director's office. Now, in the past year or so, we have had few more additions to NIBMG family, and the structure it's becoming more structured. And also research office is now kind of taking like that central role for all the communications for the project related matters, AMR related matters. So so far we have been involved in creating processes for efficient management of funds, also maintaining databases for all the different for all the grants that have been applied for, which have been successful, which have not been successful, the different presentations that have been made to DVT, the different reports that have gone out for different projects, and also from the institute. We are kind of serving as that reservoir of information. Also, we are now beginning to also get queries from the PIs for to assist them with their documentation when they are in initiating a collaborative project, or if they have a grant sanction and they want the documents ready for documents have to be sent to the funding agency for activation of the grant, etc. Also, sometimes PIs do have an idea in their mind, and they come and talk to me about it, and to ask me to just be on a lookout for any grants which may suit the kind of work that they would like to do. Apart from this, we have also been working towards a newsletter for NIBMG. So we have just published our first issue, and this was released on August 6th, which was our foundation day, and now we are working on the second one. So with regards to the application process, I would suggest all the applicants to start building on their application, because apart from talking to your supervisor and the head of the institute about what their idea of a research office is, you will also have to do a little bit of soul searching for as to why do you want to be in the field, and why research management, and why the particular institute that you are applying for. And as Savita has described, the IRMI webinars are a great start, especially for people who are very new to the to research management, because these webinars give you a very good overview of the different aspects of research management, and then depending on the institute, your host institute, you can tailor-make the application and streamline it accordingly, depending on the needs of your host institute. Also, do get it reviewed apart from your supervisor, if possible, also get it reviewed by an expert in the research management area, because they would be able to pick out if there are any problems with your application. And with regards to the steering committee that you need to propose, I would suggest it would be good if you can have a representation from administration, because the administration of the institute is going to be very important in the success of a research office. So their input is going to be really helpful for you. So with the provisions of the fellowship, you know that there is salary support, and it is a huge help, especially if an institute is planning to start a research office, because at that time the administration is not sure whether they want to invest in a research office without knowing what the output is going to be. So the salary support helps a lot in reducing that burden on the institute. The training support that you get gives you that opportunity to go out and get your enroll in different workshops or trainings for in different aspects of research management, which you can, and then you can probably choose the one that you are more interested in for your for furthering your career. So, for example, I enrolled in a workshop on science communication because I was interested in that. That was an online workshop. I do plan on taking up a course on IP management. So those are the things that you can do with the money that you get. And then last but not the least, the mentoring support is like the cherry on the cake, because the first 6 months when you start, there are so many questions that you have about how to set things up, how to move it forward, what will happen in a few months' time, and then also you keep getting queries from the faculty members, etc. So the one-on-one sessions that you have will be very helpful to sort your plan out, and you will also get different ideas about what else you can do for your research office. The workshops that happen are, apart from giving you information about information about the research management part, you will also get to know your other RM fellows and help you build your network, which is great. However, for the mentoring, I would not say that it is only 6 months. I think if you are part of the IRMI network, it goes much beyond that. I personally have reached out to a lot of experts in the field for very small queries, and they have been really patient and have responded to all and helped me through it. So I think being part of the IRMI network itself is going to be a great help for you. So with that, I would thank you for listening to me and for being patient. Thank you to IRMI for giving me this opportunity to share my experience. And please do reach out to me if you need any help from me. These are my contact details here. Thank you.
Thank you, Alpana, for sharing your experiences. This will help all the people, participants, to apply for the grant. So now that we spoke to a fellow and about the fellowships, we'll now move to someone who has the research grants. So we'll talk to Dr. Anirban Chakraborty, who is currently the Director of Research and Development at Ashoka University. So he works closely with the academic leadership team to concretize the university's academic and research administration. Previously, he was also the Assistant Registrar and the Deputy Registrar at Presidency College. So he's completed his master's and PhD in nanoscience from University of Calcutta. He's also interested in research in higher education management and policy issues. He has been awarded the India Research Management Initiative grant by the India Alliance in 2021 to create a new vertical on research grant advising and understand the best practices and build networks in this field. So I now hand over the screen to Dr. Anirban for his sharing his experiences and his journey. Over to you.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, IRMI team, for this presentation. There is a good news for me. I got a promotion and I became the assistant vice president very recently. So not the director, the assistant vice president. So I am from Ashoka University and I am an IRMI research grant awardee. I got this in late 2020 in the second call, and the project started from 2021. So the IRMI team suggested me to cover three main points: my own trajectory, my own career, and then speak a little bit about Ashoka Research Office, and then speak about something about our own grant, which I got from this IRMI project. So to just start with, this is my journey. As mentioned very clearly, master's, PhD from Calcutta University. After completing my PhD, as usual, I am thinking about going for a postdoc. I got something, but all of a sudden I got a chance in Presidency University for some research and administration. Initially, I thought it as a short-term event, but that did not happen, and I stay in administration for the last 11 years. And from Presidency, I moved to Ashoka University in 2017. And as you can see from my PhD time, from all of these nanoparticles, graphs, you can see me in 2009 working in the atomic force microscope. The career trajectory has been changed, and these are the terms I used to have dreams nowadays about, India Gadget, Department of Biotechnology, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, official documents, blah, blah, blah. But to be very honest, the transition is not bad. Whatever I learned from my PhD time, it helps me a lot in doing this job, particularly in the research management or higher education management. And of course, as after spending 10 years, I am now also focusing in more research, hardcore research, not in nanoscience, but in higher education management and research management. These are some of the publication I already started getting. And thanks to DBT India Alliance and the IRMI initiative, now I can write one my own project. I got a grant from this. So this is me. So to set the context, I thought that just to put some numbers in front of you, why research management is important in Indian context. So definitely we are a developing country. Our gross expenditure in research and development as a percentage, it's near about 0.7%, and all the developing nations, they have near about 2%. So there is a suggestion that it should grow up very rapidly. We have a vast higher education and research network in this country, almost 1,000 plus universities, 42,000 plus colleges, research institute, blah, blah, blah. Very recently, we are asked by this new education policy with a lot of reform suggestion. There is a draft science and technology and innovation policy is also there. And there is a clear-cut official statement from the government that the gross enrollment ratio in the higher education should reach 50%, the same at least with the China and Brazil by 2035. That means we have to create more universities, more research center in a very, very rapid manner. So all this number tell us one thing very seriously. This higher education and this research is a very fast growing industry in India, no doubt about it. But if you look into the research management part, there is a serious lack. I mean, very few universities and institutions have their own research offices. So if you think about the state-aided universities, other private colleges, there is no concept of research office. So there is a clear-cut lacking. And day by day, the research grant contracts are becoming very competitive, global in nature. So research management is the need of the hour for bringing good practices, networking, opportunities for careers and skill development and all. So keeping in mind all of these things, few institutes have started creating their own research office. As Savita mentioned, she's the first one in NCPS who have created the research office, which is really, really very successful. At Ashoka also, when I joined in 2017, we thought about a research office. So this is the structure. Ashoka is a liberal arts, interdisciplinary research university. It's not about sciences. It has a lot of humanities and social science. That's the beauty of Ashoka. So at Ashoka, our research office, if you think about vertical wise, there are mainly 4 verticals we have in our research office. Of course, the grant management, which, caring about this grant proposal, helping the faculty, creating an environment for more research output and all. I mean, mentoring the entire life cycle of the grant, which Savita has mentioned. Apart from that, we also created within the research office this research infrastructure management, to utilize the facilities in a very proper manner. That's the concept. So any development in the research infrastructure goes through from research office, and we have dedicated research manager in our office who is taking care about of this. We have also scholar management who takes care about the PhD program, and also entirely the various staff we have, the research staffs we have for various projects and all. We also very recently introduced this academic communication vertical. So one of the purpose of this vertical is to mainly deal with the research communication, public engagement. We create basically layman summaries for the published research paper, give it to our media team, then they spread out or outreach this research, just to just bridge between the research and the society in a very cohesive manner. So these are the main 4 verticals. 1 year back, when we look into this IRMI initiative and I look into the call, what we realize is that we need to focus a little bit more in the grant advising and pre-award processes. So on that ground, we wrote this proposal and submitted to IRMI. And this is all about this proposal. The title of the proposal was Building a New Vertical for Research Grant Advising at Ashoka University. And as you can see, some of the milestones are creating a proper funding database for our faculty and researcher. Sharing with them grant information in a very positive and regular manner, assisting faculties more when they are writing grants, from this interdisciplinary concept. It is very important. We felt it that it is really very important, and in humanities, social sciences, it's very, very, very tough to find out the proper funding agencies also. And also arranging meeting, workshops, seminars, lecture series based on the grant management or whatever the funding agencies are thinking about, bringing people from various stakeholders of these agencies to Ashoka. So these are mainly the 4 things we are doing. And from this grant, as you can see, Dr. Shruti Srivastav, we hired Shruti. She was a PhD from CDFC Hyderabad. We recruited Shruti from our IRMI grant as a grant manager, and she is the person who is leading all this initiative or taking execution responsibilities of all these initiatives. And till date, from 1st October 2021 till date, this grant is still ongoing. As you can see the number funding database, we have almost 200 plus grant database, and we are thinking for creating an online database, publish it to Ashoka website for everybody. I mean, we don't want to restrict it only for Ashoka University. So the grant information, at least 92 faculty has been, they got our support into it. Assistant, we have successfully submitted for during this time 40 applications. All those PIs, all those faculty researchers came to research office, and research office took the responsibility of helping them in budgeting, preparing their grant in a particular format, or helping them in registration and all of these things. So these are some of the numbers, these are some of the achievements we already got from this grant. I would rather suggest all of you, if you have an existing research office, if you have fantastic ideas for growing, or you want to establish your research office into a different level, you have to have some sort of this kind of support. Please do apply into this call. And India Alliance is really very flexible. They provide a lot of support. You can easily connect with the IRMI team. You can ask them, and this is really a very good opportunity, and of course a very unique opportunity to tap in. So this is the research office. As you can see, we have Professor Shashidhara is the dean. We have quite a decent number for all those 4 verticals, and I am happy for any suggestions, any comments if you have for us. And if you really need any kind of further support regarding your application of grant, I am happy to talk with you, discuss with you. These are my email addresses, and that's it. I will stop here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chakraborty, for taking us through your briefly through your journey. Now we having heard from fellows and grants awardees. Now we will go to someone who has been on the other side of the table. Ms. Silk Blom is an expert in higher education management, and she has joined here today to talk about the research management ecosystem. I'll briefly introduce her. She has more than 20 years of experience in managing research operations in both academic and private sector environments, with a strong track record of developing international collaborations and growing research portfolios. She is currently a director of the 4 Sciences Group Limited, which is a vehicle to support higher education development and research excellence with a focus on emerging and changing institutions worldwide. In the past, she has held director level positions in different prestigious institutions in several different countries. So today she is here to talk to you about the development of the research ecosystem and her insights as an IRMI reviewer. So I hand it over the screen to Ms. Blom for her presentation on her views and insights.
Thank you so much, Himashri, for the kind introduction and just giving me an opportunity to talk a little bit about research management. If you could just go to the next slide. Yeah, I think Himashri already introduced me so kindly and said so much about my background. So just to add to that, maybe that I've spent quite a lot of work on establishing research functions internationally. I built the research office at KAUST about a decade ago, and since then worked in Africa quite a bit, in Cameroon and Ethiopia, again to develop research networks. So what I want to talk about a little bit today is maybe very briefly, considering the time, about some observations from this work. And then I wanted to share also a view of how it is to be on the other side of the table, being an IRMI reviewer. So Himashri, what I would suggest is that maybe we go to slide number 8. Because Savita and Anirban just now, they have introduced so nicely, the research life cycle and why we need research support. So I thought, yeah, if we go 2 slides further, then we can just look at the pillars of research management. And I think that's a really good starting point. Yeah, if you go, yeah, perfect. So just looking at what does research support mean, and I think Anirban, he gave us a really good insight about that. I think we have a level of process and policy development and the infrastructure that we need in our institutions. And then, of course, it's people and people skills. And looking at the IRMI initiative, I think we see really nicely how this initiative tries to build all these 3 areas through the different grants. So what I thought I'd do is I just picked one of those aspects, and I wanted to talk a little bit about process and policy development and what that means and what kind of questions those are. And I will never forget that when I joined KAUST 10 years ago as essentially a very new university, which basically just started from scratch. We had zero policy environment at all. And I remember my colleagues from the UK saying, wow, isn't that wonderful? You have no rules, you can do what you want. And I think it's really important to realize that actually you do need these rules and regulations, but you need them in a constructive way, in an enabling way. So if we go to the next slide and just look at what do policies and processes do, and if we just take a classical, typical grant application, so just in this kind of a life cycle that Savita has shown us, then there are some classical questions really. You know, you as an academic, you have the idea, this is the research you want to do, but what is the cost of that research? How you define an average salary cost? What is your overhead rate? And whom could you ask to waive it if the funder doesn't pay it? Who actually approves an application before it goes out? Who approves the funder that you're actually happy to work with this funder? What are the terms and conditions that you can negotiate? What's your institutional position on this? Who authorizes an agreement? Who signs it? Who can set up the grant account? Who will write invoices, authorize expenditure? These are all really kind of simple questions, and often you don't think about it until it actually happens and you think, oh, I'm not quite sure to whom to go and how to do it. Classical question that we often find is, what is the process to employ somebody on a grant? And then do we need to operate in project years rather than financial years? Do we need a different ledger for that, a different account for external funding? So do we need different rules for external funding compared to what we do in-house? Then there is a whole kind of can of worms around research ethics and integrity. There are publications, funders have open access requirements, and so on and so on and so on. So when you talk about research support and research management, I always find this is such a crucial position that sits somewhere between the academic side of the house and the administrative side of the house. It's really key to have buy-in from your senior management to ensure that actually you have the authority and accountability together with responsibility. And ultimately, it's always the external rules and regulations that you have signed up to that will dominate those internal ones. So a lot of this is really about managing risk to the institution, to the individual. Of course, the funder, they want to manage their risk. So if we look at key drivers for success, what makes a successful research office? So if we go on to the next slides, just a kind of a couple of thoughts on those key drivers for success. So policies and processes, they really rely on cooperation and understanding of all internal stakeholders. So your finance department, your legal department, but also the library and lots of other players that come in at different points in that long research life cycle. And as I said, one of the biggest hurdles is that often it's those external rules that are dominant, because ultimately you sign up to those and say, yes, we comply with them. And as Anyaban was saying just now, I think it's so crucial to share templates and use networks to kind of, you know, drop an email to somebody else and kind of try not to reinvent the wheel, and probably also not to aim for perfection and always think what is the worst case that can happen, and then be pragmatic. So at the level of infrastructure, I always think it's so useful to identify points of contact in each department and make sure they understand why you need what you need and when you need it, and be clear in those communications. And then just a very brief remark on staffing, because it's an ongoing question. What's the ideal research manager? And I think there is no ideal research manager, in the sense of that looking at all these different skills, you need to cover such a range of skills and areas that you need lots of different skills and expertise. So this question of, do research managers need doctoral degrees? Do they need scientific backgrounds? Yeah, it might be helpful at times to have that. On the other hand, they might need to have a legal background, or they might need to have a financial background, or be an excellent project manager. So there's a lot of kind of, well, practical work around this. There is also some academic work kind of around, a piece of work that I particularly like. Some Celia Whitchurch, she has cloned that phrase, third space professionals, these people that sit in between and that are working in highly qualified and highly skilled roles, but are neither just an academic nor are they just an administrator. And I think that's food for thought, really, to look at what kind of people do I need. And I think it's also, when you look at research support, it's always important to think, how do I measure that I actually have success, that my team, my office works well? And quite a few people say, well, maybe success is if nothing goes wrong, because that's generally when you know, I need to tweak my process here, my policy. So I think it's quite important to define some clear and measurable objectives to look at this space. And before I come to talking about the reviewer part of work a little bit, I just wanted to share some very top level thoughts on lessons learned from working internationally. So if we can look at the next slide, then I think for me the key lesson really is that research support is an integral part of research nowadays. But we also need to acknowledge that research support creates a transaction cost, which is often that what then ends up being an overhead, because these offices cost money. So I think it's absolutely fundamental to see that research support should enable research. It should not create bureaucratic hurdles for the sake of it. So I think that balance, to get that balance right, that is a real skill. The other lesson for me to learn is that there's no one structure for research support, and I'm always slightly wary of people who come and say, oh, at X we did this, and if you use the model that we have in the UK, then it'll work all fine, and the next person comes and says, oh, but in the US we do. So I think there are lots of different approaches, and it's about tailoring that to the local and national context. I think the other point that's really important, and that's why I shared some thoughts on process. People are absolutely crucial and fundamental, but there's always the danger of having that one brilliant individual, and ultimately they hold it all together, but they can also become a single point of failure, which you often notice once they have left the institution. So I think when you look at developing these processes, it's really crucial to look at standards, best practice. And while a lot of people say, oh, but my institution is different, I think there is this aspect, but yes, your institution, of course, is unique, but there is an external funder out there, and that external funder is the same for everybody, and they want to see certain standards. And it's really important to kind of get that balance right, and also to not reinvent the wheel. And the final point, I think that's really crucial, and I think this is where IRMI just absolutely gets it right. The kind of, if you start building research support structures, you need upfront investment to enable externally funded research, which will then give you the return in investment. So just really very briefly talking about being an IRMI reviewer. So if we go to the next slide, I just want to share just some thoughts on just some facts as well, how we operate. So I've been a reviewer for the IRMI research management grants and fellowships for the last 3 years. We currently have 6 reviewers appointed by the trustees of the India Alliance. We have a code of conduct and a conflict of interest register that we follow. And each year, when all your applications have come in, each of us do an independent review of each proposal, and we score each of these proposals and then submit them back to the team together with written justifications and comments. Then we have a really big and actually quite long facilitation and selection meeting to discuss those scores that we all have given. Two reviewers will always present your application and discuss the scores. Other will chip in. We have a joint discussion and then review our scores again and might adjust to agree a final score of that application. So of course, ultimately it's about approve or reject, but there are a lot of nuances in there where we might decide to ask for further information to clarify something. We might make a conditional award. We also sometimes think whether an application would fit better in a different category where we move them around. So if we look at assessment criteria, what are we actually looking at on the next slide? So, I mean, in many ways, it's just as a grant application that your academics will submit. You know, it's ultimately about the quality of application, but of course, fundamentally also, how does it meet the criteria of the call? Is it actually fit for purpose? Are the activities likely to achieve the endeavored outcome? We look at timelines, time commitment, and resource requirement. Are you realistic in what you're proposing? Have you considered that things might go wrong and how you might deal with it? Is it embedded in the institution? And that comes back to that single point of failure to ensure it's really well embedded. Is it sustainable? What, you know, where are you heading to in the long term? And is there a benefit for the wider research ecosystem in India? And of course, we look at potential of applications where they could be improved, which is why we sometimes then come back and say, oh, could we clarify this point? So just some very brief observations on the next slide, what we discuss in our meetings. So we really look at the level of detail provided. Do we know enough? Have we actually understood this all fully? We look at, particularly for the fellowships, at balancing of academic and administrative careers and responsibilities. Ultimately, this is about supporting the research management development in India. So we really look at, is that balance right? And we look at the kind of balance between the uniqueness of the institution versus kind of really aiming for common standards and best practice. We do see a lot of applications focusing on systems and bespoke solutions. There is a lot to be said about that, and we could certainly have a separate session on that. But just to say that often it's good to share systems, to have common standards again, because ultimately you all try to achieve the same. So I wanted to close this session really with just some thoughts and considerations that you might want to make. And that is clearly just my personal view, what kind of I would suggest you to consider. So if we go to the next slide, I just kind of brought out a couple of suggestions when you write this application, and really think of us as sitting there reading this and needing to get familiar with your context and your institution. So tell us, what is the problem you're trying to address? How exactly are you aiming to do it, and why is it important? How will you know that you have succeeded? Similarly, if you apply for a fellowship, tell us how it will develop your skills, what is the pathway, how is it embedded in your institution, and then be realistic. What is actually doable in the time you have available. And we don't, nobody expects perfection. We all know that things go wrong, and they certainly will occasionally. And what we are much more interested in is that you have factored that in, that things are iterative. And it's great to see when somebody has put this into a wider context and is using networks, for example. So just as a kind of maybe a closing word, also use the IRMI network. Savita initially mentioned those wonderful webinars and so on. I think there's a huge kind of library of resources there that is really valuable in joining this up. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure we have a bit of time later on for any questions and discussion. Thank you.
Silke, thank you so much for joining us today. This means a lot.
Thank you. And now we'll move into the next session we have in hand. So we'll really now will join us again to talk about the third grant, that is the travel grant we have. So over to you, really now.
Thank you, Himashri. So I'll just share my screen in a second. So is my screen visible? Can someone confirm?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Himashri. So now going into the RM grants. So the RM grants are mainly aimed at supporting. We've already heard about the RM fellowships, which are to start off the Research Management Office as well as RM Fellow, and the RM grants which were to augment the institutional facilities at a host institution. And now the third one that we come to is the Research Management Travel Grants. So these Research Management Travel Grants are aimed to facilitate networking between research managers. And it does so by supporting the research managers and administrators at Indian institutions in attending in-person or virtual conferences or workshop in the area of research management. And what is the eligibility criteria for this research management travel grants? So for the IRMI travel grants, the individuals applying should be part of the IRMI network, and they should be employed at Indian Indian institutions and hold an RM role, and they should have at least 3 years of experience in research management. And now some of the provisions of the different aspects of the grants that of these travel grants that I would like to discuss are, firstly, these awards are up to a max total of 3 lakhs each. And the support from this award is mainly towards travel, visas, the accommodation, the meeting registration costs, as well as any related justified cost towards the attendance of any in-person visit or any other virtual conference that you are attending and that you would propose attending for in the field of research management. Now, a point to note here is that it is allowed to attend multiple events, although relevant details for each of the events should be included at the time of the application. And finally, the support of attending events or these research management events can be asked in the following two windows, that is either from April to September 2023 or from October 2023 to March 2024. So next, I would like to talk about what are the institutional contributions required in a research management travel grant. So firstly, as for all our fellowships as well as management RM grants, even the travel grant applications are allowed only from individuals that are part of not-for-profit institutions, and the institutions which support biomedical research or clinical and public health research. The institution has to complete the institutional registration form, and the institution needs to nominate the applicant, and the institution also needs to advance costs that have to be take cost towards the travel or visas or registration, etc. And these costs would be reimbursed by the India Alliance upon completion of the proposed event attendance. And finally, there's a requirement of a letter of support from the sponsor justifying the request, as well as a letter of recommendation from an individual apart from the sponsor who knows the nominee or for who's applying for this travel grant. And what are some of the selection criteria that the key points in an application the office looks at? So firstly, it is the office will consider the contribution or the experience from attending a particular or defined event towards the applicant's specific professional development goals. What is the contribution of this experience towards the applicant's current work in the research management and administration zone that he or she is working in, as well as what are the ways or proposed ways or that are added in the application through which they are planning to disseminate the knowledge and the information they have gained by attending this conference or event that they have proposed. So moving on, some of the key research management events that generally happen, which we would like to share with you, are INOMS, which is going to happen next year from May to June, from 30th May to 2nd June 2023. And there's a SARIMA, so SARIMA holds BICRA, which is also very interesting research management conference. And there is NCURA, or the National Council of University Research Administration. They also hold a number of conferences in this area of research management. And research management, apart from these, we also have IRMA conference. And today, as part of this talk, as part of this outreach event, we would be playing a short excerpt of a video from one of our travel grant awardee from 2021 round, Mr. Gordon Fernandez. And in this video, he describes his experience of presenting a poster at the European Association of Research Managers and Administrators, that is IRMA, that was held in Oslo, Norway in May 2022. So Godwin is currently a research manager research group manager of the Addictions Research Group at Sangat, Goa.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity to talk about my trip to Norway and my experience in attending the IRMA conference. This was held in May for 3 days. And the purpose for choosing this conference was that this was the first conference that I found which was happening in person. Another reason for going for this conference is that I felt the presentation that I wish to do for this conference was valid for this kind of group, because IRMA conference would have managers from Europe, and something that I've done in India would be worth presenting in such a group and getting feedback for. Of course, my abstract was accepted, and that's how I had to apply. I got to apply for the travel grant. Attending IRMA conference is considered as one of my exciting trip, because this was the first time that I was traveling international. This was the first time that after a gap of almost 2 years that I was attending in-person conference. And it was exciting also because I was expected to meet people who are working in a similar role as mine, definitely more experienced, but someone who can understand the struggles and challenges that I go through in the work that I do. We get opportunities to attend other research conferences as well, but sometimes they do not connect as much with our challenges and difficulties of a research manager, and hence I felt attending this conference was worth, because I would be meeting research managers and research administrators who have similar experiences. What I did in Oslo, the main reason for attending this conference was that my poster presentation was accepted. I presented a poster based on the survey that I had done in India. I will be talking a little more about my poster presentation in the coming slide. Networking with research managers and administrators was something that I kept as priority while thinking of this conference. And since I was traveling a long distance, this being the first international conference, I could not do without keeping some time for sightseeing. So I'll be talking a little bit about the sightseeing as well. So this year the conference was held in Oslo, and around 1,150 participant had registered. It was held over 3 days. And as you see from the pictures, there were number of sessions uh, on different topics and in different format. It was held at one huge venue with a number of different spaces and sessions happening at the same time. Along with the sessions, there were 38 posters that were presented, and one of the poster was mine. Uh, to talk to you briefly about my poster, the title of my poster was Research Management Experiences and Needs of Researchers in India. Through this poster, I presented my findings of a survey that was done in India among 103 participants, and these participants were from 8 research organizations. Through this survey, I wanted to understand the experiences of researchers and the gaps in research management within the organization. Um, there were mixed participants in the survey, ranging from senior researchers, mid, early career researchers, and some administrators as well. Majority of the participants were early and mid career researchers. Interesting experience while presenting this paper at Oslo was that the feedback that I've got from those who came to visit the poster was very encouraging, and I should say I learned a lot from it. This was my third poster presentation. Two of previous two posters were presented in India. However, I see a vast difference between how people respond to posters in such international conferences. One of my major takeaway from here is that those who visited my posters didn't just ask me question about my survey or the work that I did in India, but a lot of them connected my findings to the situation that they are in. Many of them talked about their own stories, which was very encouraging. Uh, they talked about what is relevant to their settings and how similar results were seen from my poster as well as for the study that they had done in their setup.